views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the program host and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by TCN TV Network Incorporated. Due to the social nature of this broadcasting channel, videos may contain content copyrighted by another entity or person. The TCN TV Network claims no rights to the said content. TCN TV Network cannot be held accountable for the copyrighted content. TCN TV Network is a messenger and sharer of information and strives to verify but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyrights or completeness of the information on this program.
And then we expand on them with very. I'll finish off the change by buying gum. Pardon? What? And it took me a while to decipher what he was saying. I came up with we can get better at what we're weak at, and we can even get better at what we're strong at. What makes communication healthy or effective? And Welcome to this edition of What Matters. I'm your host, Eric Helita, and today I am here with my guest, Jeff Bollars.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Right before we started, I was saying to Jeff, it's a pleasure to have him here because one, I do follow him on social media, so it's always nice to meet people in person. And two, we need more men to do so much. So I thank you. Oh dear, that's the actual show, guys. Sorry. So I thank you for coming out and speaking on this topic. So today we will be speaking about mental health in the workplace. Now, this topic is really important and really huge. I'd actually like to start today with some stats before I introduce Jeff, because I want you guys to get an understanding of how serious this is. And if you don't mind pulling up the stats on the percentages, the Canadian stats for the mental health, there we go. So here in Canada, we've got 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health issue. We've got 1 in 3 will experience a mental health illness at some point in their life. 70% of Canadian employees are concerned about workplace psychological health and safety. 70%. Like, that is the vast majority. And 14% feel their work environment is not healthy. 60% of people with mental health problems or illnesses won't ask for help. So more people than not will never ask for help. And 23%, almost a quarter of all Canadians, are comfortable about talking with mental health with their employers. So that's a quarter are okay with it, and over half will never speak about it. And as Jeff and I were speaking about before the show, we believe that those numbers are really
Definitely higher.
Much higher, right? Much higher. So Jeff is a very interesting gentleman. He was a CO, so a correctional officer, for 14 years here in the Toronto area. Yep. And you dealt with children and you dealt with adults, right? Youth and adults. And Jeff is now retired from that position.
Yes.
He's out of jail.
Thankfully, yes.
Yay. And now currently he is a lifetime entrepreneur. That's what he will be. And Jeff also, very interestingly, is the single dad of a lovely 21. She's 21 now?
21-year-old.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah. Time flies.
Time flies. Of a 21-year-old daughter. So you've done a lot of things in an interesting way, a bit differently, I'd say.
Yeah. I gained custody of my daughter when she was about 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It was me and her figuring it out. Got into corrections shortly after, just because, from an income standpoint, it was probably one of the easier choices, just based on how the pay grades go. Got into law enforcement. Thankfully, as a young black man in the city, I didn't get into too much trouble as a youth. So I was able to have that option available to me, and it was great. Started in youth, wanted to give back. I identified a lot with some of the young young men that I was dealing with.
Mhm.
I grew up in Rexdale, and I saw a lot. A lot of my acquaintances, friends were involved in the year of the gun. So I
Yeah.
saw a lot of death, and I saw a lot of people that are no longer here, that are just based on circumstance. And as a result, when I was there in youth, I really wanted to do something,
That's
something positive. So
That's amazing. So you went into law enforcement, and like you said, very fortunately on the other side, not as someone who's incarcerated, but also too with the eye to help.
yeah, definitely.
And I think that's really important. The intention with which we do things and the way we start things. Unfortunately, it doesn't always manifest that way, and I'm sure through your years of being there, which you will tell us about,
Yeah.
your wonderful initial intention to go in and help. North America has a very punitive system. That's something I've learned about our jail system versus a lot of other places in the world. Our system is very punitive. They say corrections, which is really interesting. They use that word, but it's often not about correcting, it's about punishment. And so I'm sure in the 14 years that you were involved in this system, you saw that. Now, before you go kind of into the details on, what really moved you to move out of that field, what is the link? And when you and I first started speaking online about your appearance, the first thing you said was mental health in the workplace. I said, Jeff, I know he's involved in a lot of things, and I wanted to know which topic he wanted to speak on. And immediately you said mental health in the workplace. Yeah. And can you tell me why that is so important to you?
I think it affects all of us. I think, especially with recent events in law enforcement, I believe it's really prevalent. The discrimination that I think a lot of people feel is based on the fact that a lot of officers are in stressful situations. They have their own biases and thought processes, and then it's magnified based on the stress of the work environment. So as a result, it plays out in their fears of people, just based on never really getting an understanding of who those people are. For myself, like I said, I started in youth. I had an understanding, and I think it was my first 4 to 5 years that were great. I had a great environment, great people that I was working with. I was at a smaller facility. I then upgraded and thought I was doing that advancement, and I went into youth corrections in the government. I was working on a private facility before, and it was night and day. The issues that you would think you would have in a correctional facility would be the inmates, and really it was the staff, it was the management.
Really?
And I believe that transcends throughout all of law enforcement, from the colleagues that I have in OPP and other areas of the field. It seems like it's the same primary things that we all experience and go through. So.
Just to let you know, OPP stands for the Ontario Provincial Police, for our international viewers out there. That's what the OPP is. So I'm thinking, and this isn't to knock institutions, but I used to work in a very large hospital, and I feel that the size of the work environment has a lot to do with that detachment. To me, it seems that the bigger the institution is, the more bureaucratic it is, and the more detached it is, the systems and policies are from the actual employees. As you try to navigate to manage thousands of people or hundreds of people, you do have to put in blanket systems, and then I feel that what it does is it really does detach from the worker, because it's just so blanket.
Yeah, and part of the issue is, I don't know if that was your experience, but there are sometimes people that have never worked in the field but have a piece of paper that says they understand the field.
Yes.
That then do the rules and regulations and the guidelines as to how we're supposed to facilitate. So they've never worked frontline, but yet they'll tell a frontline officer who's dealing with the issues and the complications and the emotions and all those other things how to be able to do their job. And that's unbalanced.
Very unbalanced. I did definitely see that. So what you have are people who go to, university, and they take their courses, and they're very far away, and they're management. So they make the rules, they make the policies, but they've never worked, as you said, front
Never,
line. We
never.
saw that a lot in the hospital with nursing, for example. So you have your management and they're telling you should do this many patients
Yeah.
per hour, this and that, because on paper, this is what looks good.
Definitely.
But if you come on the floor
Right.
and try to execute this plan that you've made on paper in your office all the way over there,
Yeah.
it does not work.
Right.
And you put your staff under tremendous stress. So for you, what was, we might have to, okay, so I'm going to set up the question, all right? For you, what was, it's two parts. What was the biggest surprise working in the correctional system? And I'd like to know also, what was your biggest stressor? So when we come back from the break, Jeff is going to tell us about that. And we're going to talk a little bit about what causes the issues at work. And then, as always, we will be wrapping up with solutions. So we'll be right back after this break.
At Benjamin Law, we understand the real cost of personal injuries. As the victim of an accident, you may be the one who's physically hurt, but your main concern is that your family are the ones who will pay the price. Benjamin Law will be there for you, helping, supporting, and working tirelessly to resolve your personal injury case. Call 1-855-899-4878 or visit benjaminlaw.ca and let our family of lawyers help your family.
My name is Trish Curling, and I am an online coach, personal trainer, and yoga teacher, and your new host of Shaping Life, which is all about understanding that we have the ability and the control to take charge of our health and wellness. But we can't do it alone, and I can't wait to sit down with the best in the industry. Please tune in every Friday at 1 p.m. live here on the TCN Network.
Welcome back to this edition of What Matters. I'm your host, Eric Halita, and today I am here with XCO, Jeff Bollars, and we are talking about
Stress in the workplace.
stress in the workplace, mental health in the workplace. And I have another set of stats, if you don't mind pulling those up. And again, nope, not those ones. We did these ones, didn't we? No? Okay, so it's because I already posted this on social media. So again, really interesting. And what I think it really surprised me, this number did surprise me, 500,000 Canadians out this week, off of work this week alone because of mental illness. 500,000. And Canada doesn't have the population that the United States does. So that number is really big relative to our population. You're looking at $56 billion that is lost by absenteeism, and very interestingly, and I think maybe this will be something that Jeff speaks about, presenteeism. People showing up at work is often the problem. When you show up at work sick, be it mentally or physically, it causes a problem for the staff, for the people you work with. You're not as effective. You've got half of the population will have mental health issues before they turn 40. By the time they turn 40, and you see the other stats. And another one that really struck me too is over 30% of long-term disability claims is because of mental health. That's almost a third of the reasons they go off. So businesses are starting to take note. They're starting to pay attention that the mental health of their employees affects their bottom line. And sadly, that's what matters, is the bottom line. Yeah. So that's what's going to cause the change. Especially when they invest heavily into their employees, like it would have been in your field.
Had a lot of coworkers off on stress leave.
Oh, but I can imagine in that.
And you're forced back.
You're forced back.
Yeah, because there's no excuse in the eyes of the employer. You know, there's no reason for you to have to take that much time off. They make sure you come back if it's a situation, like regardless if you're ready or not. So there are times where and I'm sure there's others that are watching that they know that there's some coworkers that should not be on the floor. You're working in a hostile situation at times, and you know, to have somebody there that's not fully there or dealing with post-traumatic stress based on another incident, It's not easy.
And it's not safe.
It's definitely not safe. There's a lot of stuff happening in facilities. I'm not going to name them, but if you pay attention to the news, you'll see right in our city there's a lot of issues happening. And as much as I'd like to say, to the ones that are watching that, I'm not there. I'm there with you because I know you guys are going through it. And, it doesn't make me feel good to know that, it's still happening. And, we're dealing with it every day. Like we see people in jail. The one thing that stuck out to me, like transferring from youth to adult, I transferred to the adult system as an officer. One of the things that stood out to me, we used to have youth have scuffles, like fights. When I got to adult and I saw men fighting, they weren't fighting to hurt each other. They were fighting to kill each other. And if you've ever been in a situation like that and you realize your position as an officer is, to keep the peace. So as soon as that happens, you have two men possibly bigger than you, whether you're male or female or other, as an officer, you have to jump in. And to see two people fighting to the death and you trying to jump in and now they're upset at you, and then possibly, and in most cases, you also get injured, you now have to go back to work the next day. Not only that, you have to work on the same unit with that person that got into that altercation with you. And you have to be indifferent.
And not be emotional.
So now you're holding back your emotions. You're dealing with post-traumatic stress. Any fear you have to hide it. Any repercussions you would like to have happen, human nature, to that individual, it's absolutely forbidden. There's many, 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 many factors. And again, it's right across the board. I believe in equal opportunity. I love my female coworkers that I worked with. But again, they're dealing with that on a level that honestly the average young lady wouldn't understand what an officer, a female officer, goes through in those positions. The catcalling, all of the other things that are involved in them being in that position it's amazing. It's incredible.
Well, you were saying something about, going back to work and not showing fear. And that's something I brought up online the other day, is that people rather be mad than sad. People almost always choose anger, the reaction of anger over sadness. And fear is another one of those things. If you're mad, right, it's a heck of a lot better than being afraid. And so I could definitely see in that situation, a lot of that would be, if you could pick an emotion, you're going to pick anger because it's the one that appears strongest. So before we went to break, I asked you that question. What was in that 14 years that you spent, what was the most surprising thing that you discovered about the system or yourself even, or your human nature?
There were two things that stuck out to me. One was I came to a swift realization that in my understanding, I'll speak for myself, the youth system did not really care about the youth. It was not a system built to help them. It was a system built to house them. They're not interested in you as an officer being a mentor to those youth. They speak about direct supervision and all this other stuff that sounds really good on paper. But then when you actually facilitate things, they shut it down. You have other officers and management who also look at that as a threat to themselves because they don't have in certain circles the ability to do what maybe you did. And as a result, it becomes a vendetta. That was one of the reasons that I had to leave youth. I can speak about it now. I had a human rights issue with a manager, to which I brought to tribunal and all kinds of other things. And as a result, I then was able to leave and transfer to another facility to be away from that. And it was as a result of, I would just call it jealousy if I had to put it in a word. It was something that I couldn't understand at the time, but the way in which this individual dealt with me was completely unprofessional, and it wasn't even spoken to. And these are the things that happen. There's tons and tons and tons of reports of black officers, people of color, minorities, women having issues that never are resolved, and you have to show up to work. And I was in that situation where it occurred, put in my reports, did all the things I should have done for 3 years, and it was never addressed. and they thought it would have gone away. But one of the things that I'll say to anybody in a situation where you're stressed out in the workplace and you feel like part of that stress is as a result of the employer neglecting, document and paper trail everything.
Yes.
That is your biggest defense. They didn't know that every single time that I picked up the phone and asked a question, that I documented it and sent an email to my house. So at that point where I then said human rights, they were like, well, we don't have any record. I said, that's interesting because I have the CCs to all of
Wow.
you. And at that point, that's when the wheels started
The wheels
turning.
started turning. And that, I mean, we were going to save some solutions for last, but that is huge.
Yeah.
That is really big. And it's a lesson I myself personally have learned the hard way. Often when you have good work ethic and you don't, you're not a petty person. You
Yeah.
don't take every little thing. You don't think to write everything down, and you don't think that, you'll even speak directly to a coworker and say, hey, you know what, Jeff, could you not do that? Because I really don't like
Yeah.
that. And little do you know, everything you do is being written up.
Yeah.
And there's a file growing.
Yeah.
So I learned the hard way from previous employment that you really do need to keep a record because someone is, and
Yeah.
it may not
Always.
be reflective of what's really going on. It's
Always.
just their side of the story. So as you see things occurring, even when your workplace is positive, you can even record that as well.
Definitely.
But definitely keep a record, and especially if things start to go south.
Definitely.
Things start to seem suspicious, start keeping a record, and that's really good. Very good tip. Just email it to yourself, because when you stop working somewhere, you lose access to the email.
Or they remove it.
Or they delete it. So if you've emailed it to yourself,
Yes.
you have it and you have the copy. So definitely make sure that you do that. So when we're going to go for another break, time passes
I know,
so
so
quickly.
quick,
Like
right?
it goes so fast. When we come back from the break, Jeff still has a second question to answer,
Yeah.
and that was was his biggest stressor. And then I want to speak about some of the stresses that people have at work. And again, we will talk about some of the solutions. So we'll be right back after this break.
World-famous spiritual astrologer and psychic Pandit Sai is born to serve people. He's an expert on palmistry and horoscope. He can handle all problems and give Vedic solutions for business, job, love, marriage, husband and wife problems, children, personal, and many others, including depression. He also performs pujas to clear all sorts of obstacles. Call Pandit Sai and see changes in your life now. 647-766-1419. Located at 2895 Derry Road, East Mississauga, Airport Road and Derry.
Welcome back to this edition of What Matters. I'm your host, Erica Elita, and today we are here with Jeff, and I've said his name two different ways now. I'm sure you've noticed.
Ballers.
Ballars. I asked him when I started, and I said the second one. He said the Ballars is from high school.
Ballers is fine. I like ballers.
He
Why
likes
wouldn't you want to be
ballers.
called a ballers?
Right?
It doesn't make sense.
So I'm here with actually Jeff Bollars, and we are talking about mental health in the workplace. And this is a really serious issue. We have half of Canadian adults with some type of mental illness. We've got 70% of people not feeling that their workplace is healthy or safe. What was it? $56 billion in losses in productivity. This is a major issue that employers are taking note of. 500,000 employees are off work this week due to mental health issues. 14% of annual profits, net profits, are cut by, again, employees who are not well. And unfortunately, as Jeff and I are speaking about today, often it is the workplace itself that causes these problems. Now, I mean, wherever we go, we bring our baggage, even though sometimes we try very hard to leave it at the door.
And that's, I think, the second part of, what you were asking me. It's that it follows you.
Yes.
You carry it with you. It's a part of you, and you don't see it. And for me, the second part was the lack of realization of who I was becoming and who I was outside of the jail, and the coping mechanisms that I now inflict on other people. So an example, it's interesting, it's around Christmas time now. A few years back, maybe about 6 years ago, about 6 years ago, I was at Yorkdale Mall shopping with my daughter, and I saw a group of individuals who I was supervising that were now released, and one of them had an issue with me because of an incident that took place. And I saw it, and when you're in law enforcement, and I'm sure other people would attest to it, there's a way that you tell your family, hey, when we're out, there's a certain signal or sign to just, kind of walk away. And me and my daughter had that sign, so she walked away at a distance, close enough that she could still see me, but these guys approached me. The guy pulled out a gun. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said, okay, what are you going to do with that? I said, if you're upset about the fact that the incident took place in the jail, well, we're not in jail anymore. And if you think that I'm a different person outside of jail than I am in the jail, we're going to have a situation, because either which way I'm the hero when City Pulse reports on it later on. And he looked at me and he was shocked. And the way I dealt with him was no flinching. There was no fear. There was just straightforward. And I think it was 2 days later, after everything was resolved, we went our separate ways. I was sitting at home with my daughter, and I looked at her and I realized I'm crazy. Like, I said to myself, I couldn't process how I just did that. There was a gun. There was an individual with a gun in front of me telling me what's up now. And I looked at him and said, do what you got to do, but one of two things is going to happen. We're going to fight. I might get hurt. Cool. I'm still the hero on City Pulse. I might get shot, die. I'm still the hero on City Pulse. Either which way, I'm the hero. You're still the guy that's going to do what he's going to do. And I really processed that, and I was like, you know what? Something about this has this.
A detachment.
You're detached from reality.
Yeah.
And what is danger and what is not. And worse, my daughter was there. And I look at these things, and I realize it's the workplace. You don't get time to process. You don't get time to speak to somebody. The people you speak to are the people in that environment because they understand. Everybody outside of that won't understand.
Right.
I remember at first when I got into corrections and I told them stories, everybody's like, oh my gosh, what? Wow, this is amazing. And then after a while, I stopped telling stories because I was like, yeah, same old, regular day. Everybody else on the outside looking in will be like, that's the craziest thing ever.
That's insane. Yeah.
Police officers, I love them. I think, they do their job, for the most part, most of them, we'd like to think. But a correction officer is the forgotten stepchild. We, after the police deal with that person, have to now take them, work with them, live with them, feed them, clothe them, deal with their behaviors that brought them to jail 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah,
and we don't have a point in which we can decompress from that. So it was one of those things where I thank God that shortly thereafter I made the decision to, walk away and retire and, just still be young enough to enjoy it. But I still, even to today, see pieces of that element in the way that I deal with things and just life. And it's really interesting, that even that I can recognize it, but I mean, beyond that it still follows you and it's a part of you no matter what. And I think that transcends throughout any job, any, career, that there's always a piece of you that's always going to be the lawyer, the nurse, the factory worker. You're always going to have that piece of you because of the environment that you're at more than you're at home.
And that's why it's so important to choose the best environment that you can. As we said when we began, you went in there with an eye to help, to make a change, to do something good. And oftentimes these institutions, they eat you. You go in all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you come out raggled
Gray
because
hairs,
yeah, you come out raggled because it's a beast.
Yeah.
And what you said about it changing the way that you process things, you living your actual outside life very differently, and for that the fact that you realize it is really amazing and important, because nothing would have changed if you didn't realize it, right? Yeah. And it took a few days. Like, you did it and you went home, and your daughter was probably freaking out.
Yeah.
And it took you a few days to say, wait a minute, that was crazy. That was messed up. Like, I invited someone to shoot me in a public place with my child nearby. Yeah. And you realize
that was major. So imagine the micro things that I do.
Yeah, the little things.
Right? And I apologize to anybody I've done any micro things to, but again, you don't realize sometimes what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're processing.
It is, I'll give a little example from my own work experience. I was an emergency room coordinator for 10 years. And our training, very interesting. It's kind of a throw in the water, and if you swim, you swim. If you sink, then I guess you don't work here anymore. And one of the things we were taught were to keep doing what we were doing even when we were speaking to patients. So keep typing. So there were times my trainer would see me saying, okay, well, your room is this and that. He's like, why are you looking at them? Why aren't you typing? So I'd type and talk. And that spilled out into my real life. And one day my children said to me, Mom, can you look at us when you speak to us, please? Can you stop what you're doing and actually look at us like you are speaking to us? So this just infiltrates your whole life. So would you say your biggest stressors was the workload? Was it your coworkers, your supervisors, the inmates themselves? What was your biggest stressor as a correctional officer?
I think it was balance. I mean, balance covers everything, really. Just being able to balance the management, able to balance the coworkers, able to, still do what's necessary and not, ruin your rep.
Right.
You have a reputation you have to uphold. If you stand for something, you have to stand for it, and if you don't, people will look and they'll find that chink in your armor. So you have to be who you say you are and make sure that maintains 24 hours a day. And then, it's a lot.
Yeah. Well,
as an officer, it's a lot, and I don't take lightly, the things that the media portrays about officers and stuff like that. I'm speaking just specifically to that because that was where I was, because it's a lot. And if the pieces aren't there to put it together so that these people can now function, you're going to have these situations you have, not to mention their own personal biases, racisms, and whatever else.
And their personal problems outside of the workplace. Like, they're just, like I said, we come with our stuff, and then we get to this institution that gives us more stuff and then gives us nowhere to unload it. You would think it's something like a correctional officer, nurses, firefighters, police officers would absolutely have structured into their workplace these kinds of reliefs, extra time off, mental. I used to have a coworker, and he would say once in a while he'd call in sick, and they'd say, oh, you're sick? He said, no, this is a mental health day. Yeah. And we all used to laugh, but that's not funny. And he was so right. And this was years before their time. So right before we go to break, I'll actually ask the question, and you guys can answer in the comments on YouTube or on Facebook, and I think everybody in this room knows the answer. But what do you think are the most stressful jobs? What do you think rank as the most stressful jobs? Feel free to comment. And what would you think are the least stressful jobs? What jobs provide the least stress? If you're going to say entrepreneur, that is not it. No. You may get a lot of joy from it, but the stress is
heavy.
Is heavy, very, very heavy, and actually self-induced, which actually almost makes it worse, right?
Yes.
All right, so when we come back from this break, we're going to touch on some of the most stressful jobs and the least stressful, and then we're also going to just talk a little bit more. I really loved what you said about, document everything. But what else can you do to relieve your stress in your workplace? We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to this edition of What Matters. I am here with Jeff Bollars. Jeff Bollars, and we're talking about mental health in the workplace, how important it is. And specifically in Jeff's situation, it was as a correctional officer.
Yeah.
I spoke a little bit on my experience as a unit coordinator of an emergency room. These are jobs, these are fields that are fast paced, are dangerous. The people who work in them tend to love them. I think it's either they love them desperately or hate them desperately. It's one,
Yep.
and it often happens to the same person.
Yep.
They go from adoring their job to loathing their job.
And then
So-
coping with
and
their
then
job.
coping with it until they quit, get fired, retire, move on. And you know, hopefully, and very sadly, you know what? Sometimes, honestly, these jobs do kill people. Like
Yeah.
the stress kills them.
Yeah.
No lie. So before we went to break, I did ask, what do you think the most stressful jobs are? What would rank as the most stressful job? And I think you'd be cheating because I did send you the infographic. Do you remember?
I don't recall.
You don't recall?
I don't recall.
What do you think it is?
The most stressful?
Most stressful job?
I think air traffic controller.
Yeah. Ooh, crashing planes.
Yes.
What would you ladies say? Most stressful job? Don't cheat and look at the screen. Did that surprise you? The last one does? Okay. Yeah, so pull it up. Okay, so we have two infographics for this. And this one made the most sense. This does come from the USA. And you'll see why I specified that when we show you the next one. But enlisted military personnel. I would think that would rank pretty high. Firefighter, airline pilot, police officer, and event coordinator, which
Event coordinator, I could see.
I can
Yeah.
absolutely
I
see
can
that.
understand that one.
It seems out of place on the list, but honestly, I can definitely, the tiny little events I've coordinated for
Definitely.
myself,
Stress.
I can imagine trying to do it big time. But you saw most of those were law enforcement, dangerous jobs, really dangerous jobs where people rely on you for their safety, and you're putting yourself at risk. Would you pull up the second one, please? Okay, and here, very different, and I found this interesting. So here we've got welfare professionals. So they're talking about social workers and mediators, but it makes sense that what you did fits in there because although a CO is not considered a social worker, that is the type of position it is, except that you are actually physically in charge of making sure they stay.
Yeah, you're the people whisperer.
I like that so much. I really do.
Yeah.
And then the least were skilled tradesmen, which I also thought was really interesting,
too, yeah.
right? Skilled tradesmen. And I would think it's because they would often, if you're skilled and you've kept up at it for many, many years, I would think that
Robotic,
you like
it's
it.
automated. It's
Yeah,
just-
automated, and
yeah,
you
you're
know
not
what I
really
mean?
seeing anything out of the norm. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not seeing anything out of the norm. You know what to
Yeah.
expect, and
Yeah.
you're considered like an expert in your field, right?
Yeah.
And so, as we know, master carpenters and so forth, they now just tell people what to do.
Yeah.
So that could be it too, that they're not actually doing it as much as telling people.
yeah.
So I just thought that was really, really interesting. But I would definitely put nurses up there. Nurses.
Nurses.
Not to diss doctors, but nurses really just take the brunt of everything. Shout out to all my nursing friends, and teachers.
Teachers, especially nowadays.
Especially nowadays, I have several friends who are teachers, and some of the stuff they share just breaks your heart. It's extremely discouraging. And again, people leaving home with their own personal problems, family issues, physical health issues, financial problems, all of those things. And then you go into a super negative environment where we often went to make change and to do good, and then we're oppressed and beaten down by the system. So, Jeff, what other, your first recommendation, his first suggestion, which was document everything and send it where?
Yourself.
Email it to yourself.
Yeah. Your own personal email.
Your
Make sure.
own, at home. Just forward it with all the CCs on it, everybody else that would have gotten it, and make sure.
BCC yourself if you don't want to CC yourself, so they don't see that you sent it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
BCC it.
Yeah, and
Yeah, definitely send it to yourself.
And BCC, I would say I would recommend that because it's interesting how people switch up when they know they're being observed,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Things change, all of a sudden their wording
Exactly.
changes and they're not being as aggressive or rude or dismissive when they wait, why do you have CC Jeff Bollars at what Gmail? Why is it going
Or
there?
even if you really want to throw a little, spice on it, put CC in the email. Just at the bottom, CC lawyer.
Yeah, just I like to add some spice, put some curry in it.
Just
You know
put
what I
them.
mean? A little
All right.
little pepper.
But
Just
yeah,
make everybody excited.
definitely.
So, what other things? I think I did send you one. Some suggestions on workplace, how to not be stressed in the workplace. If you'd pull that one up, how to stay mentally healthy at work. Some of us would say don't go.
Yeah, definitely stay away.
Just stay away. But if that is not an option, go home on time. I learned real hard, real fast. Don't try to be a superhero. Stay
no.
late, work through your breaks, come early because then they just expect it.
Yeah,
That's all that happens.
Yeah.
You don't get no accolades, people. Let that go.
Yeah.
They just expect you to be there. Take your lunch break, as I said. Set realistic deadlines. Don't take on the whole world. Take your holiday leave. You will get no brownie points for not taking your vacation. And some workplaces don't even roll it over. And allocate time to do the things that you enjoy. Now, those are all, take your break, don't stress yourself out, have a reasonable workload. But what else can we do?
You need an outlet. You need something that you like. Everyone has a vice. Try to keep your vice above bar, but have something that you love and that you can indulge in. And also notify the people around you that this is what you love to do, so that they're not also looking at it as an imbalance. They're looking at it as, oh, this is his thing,
Right.
or her thing. And the other thing is maybe have somebody impartial that you can just speak to. I didn't really understand the power of that until more recently in life, and I think that's a huge, huge thing. Somebody who's not affiliated in the field that you're in, somebody who's not just listening, for the excitement of your stories or the drama. They just really just are there as a sounding board. I think it's important that if you can find somebody like that you do, because that could really make the difference, at least to keep you going. It might not solve all of your problems, but at least it allows you to just continue to progress and have something to be able to speak to.
So, black man, did you just say to me that men should speak
No, I'm
to
ask-
other people?
ask anybody who
about
knows
their
me. I talk
problems?
too much, so I'm not your quintessential poster child at all. So I talk a lot, and yeah, however it comes out at times. But I do my best to explain as best as I can. But it's important. I didn't have a lot of people to talk to initially, and it showed. There were a lot of things that I was doing that were counterproductive and even self-destructive, and it was as a result of not being able to speak and be understood or feel to be understood, So I think it's really important that you find somebody or somewhere that you can voice yourself and have a voice.
Speak up.
Yeah, for
Talk.
sure. For sure.
It is not unmanly to speak to someone.
I don't know if it's a manly thing. I think it's more about the fear of just people taking it out of context. I don't know that, maybe it's me, but I just never found it was about the manly thing. It was just more about being misunderstood. And as far as being a guy and misunderstood, I don't know if I ever correlated the two. I just didn't want to be misunderstood, so I'd keep things quiet.
But do you see that though with other men because that's something that I know I see, and I explain to other men that I probably get more information from many males than they do, because guys will say, well, guys don't talk about them like they talk about it with me. They tell me, but maybe it's because I'm coming from a non-judgmental place, right? I'm neutral, so they are more open and willing. And what I find is that a lot of men do want someone to talk to about their stress, but like you said, they don't want to, someone to come at them with a butterfly net, or call work and say, yeah, he can't come back because it's just not working.
Yeah,
So
it's a safe place. You just need a safe place.
Yeah,
That's really
just
all it is. I don't know if that it's men in particular. It's just You just don't want to be misunderstood.
You just don't want to.
However you take that is, the nutshell of what it is. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So keep record of any incidents at work, especially if you're having problems with your coworkers, your supervisors. Have an outlet.
Have an outlet.
And you do it. Because a lot of people love things that and they'll tell you, I haven't done that in years. Oh, I love dancing, haven't been in years. Oh, I love knitting, haven't done it in years. So not only have a love and identify it, but actually put aside the time to do it. It's like essential. Just like you have to go to work, you have to play.
Yeah.
You almost have to tell yourself that I must do this because this is my playtime.
Yeah.
Have someone that you can talk to. Something that I really strongly believe in is find yourself, if it's getting really bad, find yourself professional help.
Definitely.
A lot of work have employee.
EAP.
Thank you, EAPs. So that's employee assistance programs. And more employers have it, even in small companies. You're seeing that now. So they have phone numbers that you can call. You have somebody to talk to, often 24/7. And if the situation is more serious, they can refer you. I'm really, really happy to see that mental health professionals are getting more and more work. People are seeking them out. They're speaking to them, therapists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, psychologists.
Oh, boy.
There's a lot of them.
That was a tongue twister.
And I'm really happy to see more and more people facing the fear of talking to someone professionally. So if your workplace is stressing you out, I'd say one of the very first steps is see if they have an EAP. See if there's someone you can talk to. Document things. If you haven't been doing it and you're watching the show and you're like, I should write this down, get an email and jot down everything you can remember, dates that you can remember vague. Ask a coworker. You remember when Mary yelled at me?
Who was
You remember
there?
what day it was?
What day it was? If it was sunny outside, whatever it was.
Write it all down. Get yourself a good file, because sometimes, you know what? You don't have to walk away empty-handed. You don't have to walk away and go on EI. Sometimes you could tell them, hand me my package and, move on. So I'm thankful that you guys are here today, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming on. I think we have more conversations to have.
Yeah, maybe.
I think we have some more conversations to have. So for all of you out there, as I said, if any of this sounds like you, if you realize your workplace is stressing you out, please take a step back, get some help, speak to someone, because your mental health matters and it goes with you wherever you go. And as the saying goes, they will post your job before they post your obituary. So please to take care of yourself.
Definitely.
Have a wonderful day. We will be back next week here on What Matters. My guest will be Andrew L. Blackwood, who I know is watching the show and probably enjoying it very much.
Andrew.
Yes.
He was my former coworker as well.
Oh, really? Yeah. Andrew, another wonderful man. And this time we'll be speaking about loneliness, men and loneliness. So you may not see me on camera much, but I will be here. And you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.